In the tranquil bamboo grove monastery, Ananda and the Buddha sat beneath an ancient Bodhi tree as the morning sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting a gentle glow upon them. The air was filled with the scent of earth and fresh grass. Venerable Ananda sat upright beside the Buddha, his brow slightly furrowed, eyes filled with doubt. He looked up at the Buddha and respectfully asked, "Bhagwan, you often say that Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are compassionate and save all sentient beings, so why do beings in the world still struggle in suffering? Since Buddhas and Bodhisattvas possess boundless spiritual powers, why do they not manifest directly to save them from the ocean of suffering?" The Buddha smiled gently, his gaze kind and profound, as if he could see through every thought in Ananda's heart. He spoke slowly. "Ananda, your fundamental nature is excellent. Your heart is filled with compassion, and you are concerned for all beings who know suffering. This is precisely the good root of a practitioner. However, the salvation offered by Buddhas and Bodhisattvas is not as simple as you might think. The suffering of sentient beings arises from ignorance and karmic formations. The salvation by Buddhas and Bodhisattvas requires the ripening of appropriate conditions." Ananda, upon hearing this, became even more perplexed and asked further, "World-honored one, if the Buddha and Bodhisattvas truly possess compassionate hearts, why do they not directly manifest miraculous powers to eliminate the sufferings of sentient beings? Are there times when Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are also powerless?" The Buddha gently shook his head, his tone soft yet resolute. "Ananda, the compassion of the Buddha and Bodhisattvas is boundless and limitless, but the karmic forces of sentient beings are like an ocean vast and deep. Although Buddhas and Bodhisattvas can guide the direction, they cannot row the boat to help sentient beings cross the sea. If sentient beings are unwilling to reach out their hands, how can the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas pull them ashore?" Ananda lowered his head in contemplation. After a moment, he asked again, "World-honored one, how can sentient beings receive the salvation of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas? Is it only those who have affinity with the Buddha who can be saved?" The Buddha nodded and replied, "Ananda, you have touched upon the crucial point. The salvation offered by Buddhas and Bodhisattvas indeed requires the destined connection with sentient beings. Just as the broad sky rain does not moisten grass without roots, the vast Buddhist teachings do not save those without affinity. Although Buddhas and Bodhisattvas aspire to liberate all sentient beings, if beings lack faith, aspiration, and practice in their hearts, even the presence of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas finds it difficult to save them." Ananda, deep in thought, continued to ask, "World-honored one, how can one establish a connection with the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas? How can one receive their compassionate salvation?" The Buddha smiled gently, his eyes radiating wisdom, and said, "Ananda, forming a connection is not difficult. One only needs to harbor kind thoughts, cultivate extensive, wholesome relationships, and diligently practice. In doing so, one will resonate with the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are always present by the side of sentient beings, but sentient beings often see without truly perceiving, hear without truly listening. Today, I shall reveal to you the profound mysteries of the Buddha and Bodhisattva salvation, enabling you to understand the underlying principles." Upon hearing this, Ananda felt joy in his heart. With hands joined in reverent salutation, he respectfully said, "World-honored one, please compassionately expound. Your disciple is eager to hear the details." The Buddha nodded and spoke slowly. "Ananda, listen carefully. The salvation of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas is like sunlight illuminating the earth, omnipresent, like a clear spring flowing silently, nourishing all things unobtrusively. However, if sentient beings tightly close the doors of their minds and refuse to accept, the salvation offered by the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas becomes difficult to manifest. I will now tell several stories to help you gain a deeper understanding of the principles within." Ananda nodded respectfully, his heart filled with anticipation. He knew that the Buddha's teaching would surely dispel his doubts and guide him toward deeper enlightenment. The Buddha gently closed his eyes, and after a moment, he opened them and spoke slowly. Ananda, let me first tell you a story to help you understand the premise of the salvation offered by Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Ananda sat upright in a dignified posture, attentively listening. The Buddha continued. In the past, there was an old woman who considered herself a devoted Buddhist for many years. She recited Buddha's name and sutras daily, her heart filled with reverence for the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. One day, a sudden flood struck the village, causing the river to rise rapidly and submerge houses and farmlands. An elderly woman was trapped on her rooftop, surrounded by a vast expanse of water. Filled with anxiety, she joined her palms together and prayed to Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, saying, I have recited the Buddha's name for many years. Now I face this great calamity. Please, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, come and save me quickly. Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, boundless in compassion, naturally heard his supplication. Soon, a young man paddled a small wooden raft to the elderly woman and said to her, Grandmother, the floodwaters are rising. Please get on my raft. I will take you away from here. The old woman looked at the young man, then at the simple wooden raft, and shook her head, saying, This raft is too small. I'm afraid it won't be stable. I am waiting for Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva to come and save me. You should leave quickly. The young man, feeling helpless, had no choice but to drift away on the wooden raft. Ananda furrowed his brow, appearing somewhat perplexed. The Buddha nodded and said, Indeed, this young man is none other than an incarnation of Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva. However, the old woman was attached in her heart to the image of Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, believing that the Bodhisattva must appear in a dazzling, majestic form, not realizing that the Bodhisattva had already manifested as an ordinary person to save her. Ananda, deep in thought, continued to listen to the Buddha's discourse. After a while, a middle-aged man rowed a small wooden boat near the old woman and shouted loudly, Elder, the floodwaters are rising swiftly. Quickly get on my boat. I will take you to a safe place. The old woman looked at him and still shook her head. You should go. I am waiting for Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva to come and save me. The middle-aged man sighed and had no choice but to row away. The Buddha paused for a moment, his gaze filled with profound meaning, and said, Ananda, this middle-aged man is also an incarnation of Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva. However, the old woman remained attached to her own expectations and refused the Bodhisattva's salvation. Ananda did not dwell on sighs. This old woman was truly stubborn, having missed the chance for liberation twice. The Buddha gently nodded and continued. Later, 2 more groups of people came to greatly assist the old woman, but he refused for the same reason every time. As the floodwaters nearly reached the roof, an old monk arrived in a large boat, and without a word, he pulled the elderly man onto the boat. Just as the old man boarded the boat, his house collapsed with a thunderous crash in the flood. Ananda breathed a sigh of relief and asked, World-honored one, is this old monk also a manifestation of Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva? The Buddha smiled and said, Indeed so. However, after the old man boarded the boat, he complained, I have believed in Buddha for so many years, but when I was in danger, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva never came to save me. The old monk listened and said helplessly to him, Before I came, the Bodhisattva had already manifested as a young person, a middle-aged person, and others to come to your aid, but you rejected them all. Now that you've been saved by me, yet you still complain that the Bodhisattva has not appeared. What kind of reasoning is this? Upon hearing this, Ananda suddenly understood clearly that the Buddha and Bodhisattvas are always by our side. It is only because we often cling and are ignorant that we miss their salvation. The Buddha nodded in approval. Ananda, you are correct. The salvation offered by Buddhas and Bodhisattvas is like sunlight illuminating the earth, present everywhere, and like a clear spring flowing, nourishing all things silently. If sentient beings have no faith, no mindfulness, and no form in their hearts, even the presence of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas cannot save them. This is the principle of no affinity, no salvation. Venerable Ananda respectfully said, "O exalted one, I understand. The salvation offered by the Buddha and Bodhisattvas requires the being's active acceptance. If beings refuse, it is like rootless grass and cannot be held accountable." The Buddha smiled and said, "Well done, Ananda. To understand this principle is true wisdom." After hearing the Buddha's teaching on the principle of not liberating without cause, Ananda's mind suddenly became clear, yet a trace of doubt still lingered in his heart. He respectfully asked, "World-honored one, if sentient beings are willing to accept the salvation of the Buddha and Bodhisattvas, can they completely transform their destiny and be free from all suffering?" The Buddha's gaze was profound, as if penetrating Ananda's thoughts, and he slowly said, "Ananda, your question touches upon another important truth in the Dharma, causality. Although Buddhas and Bodhisattvas possess boundless compassion and supernatural powers, they cannot alter the cause and effect that sentient beings themselves have created. This is the principle of not being ignorant of karma." Ananda slightly furrowed his brow, appearing somewhat puzzled. The Tathagata gently nodded with a calm, yet resolute demeanor, affirming that karma is indeed so powerful that not even Buddhas and Bodhisattvas can alter it. "Ananda, cause and effect is the natural law of the universe, like the relationship between a seed and its fruit. The seed you plant will bear the fruit you reap. Buddhas and Bodhisattvas can guide sentient beings on how to plant good causes, but they cannot bear the negative consequences on behalf of others. Let me tell you a story, and you will understand." The Buddha said, "While I was observing, a sorrowful event occurred. King Lioli led a large army to attack the Kapilavastu kingdom, intending to slaughter the members of the Sakya clan. After learning of this matter, I felt compassion in my heart, and thus approached King Lioli 3 times to persuade him, hoping he would let go of his hatred and cease the killing. Though I urged with a heart of compassion, the hatred of King Lapis Lazuli was profound and irreconcilable. Ultimately, he led his army to invade the kingdom of Kapilavastu and carried out a brutal massacre." A trace of sorrow flickered in Ananda's eyes. "O Shakyamuni, can even your supernatural powers not save the followers of the Sakya clan?" The Buddha slowly said, "Ananda, even the venerable among my disciples have attempted to use supernatural powers to save their kin." He placed 500 members of the clan into a bowl and brought them to a safe place. However, after King Luli left, he opened the alms bowl cover and found that the 500 tribespeople had transformed into blood and water. Ananda asked in astonishment, "World-honored one, why is this? Can even supernatural powers not alter cause and effect?" The Buddha nodded and replied, "Indeed, that is so. This illustrates the principle that supernatural powers cannot overcome karma, and the power of the Buddha cannot override cause and effect. I told Mu Qianlian that the calamity befalling the Sakya clan originated from their karma in past lives." Ananda asked curiously, "World-honored one, what karma did they create in their past lives to have incurred such severe retribution?" The Buddha explained that long ago, the villagers of a certain village, taking advantage of the dry season, netted all the fish from a pond, cruelly killed them, and dismembered their bodies. Every villager participated in the slaughter, except for one child who, out of mere playfulness, tapped the head of a large fish with a wooden stick, causing it to scatter. Ananda then deeply inquired, "Blessed one, how is this connected to the calamities of the Sakya clan?" The Buddha continued, "Ananda, those villagers of the past lives of the Sakya clan, and the fish that were killed represent King Lioli and his army. They have been reborn as humans in this life to repay the debts from their past lives, and the child tapping on the fish head is my previous incarnation. Precisely because of this, when King Lapis Lazuli massacred the Sakya clan, although my heart was filled with compassion, I could not alter their fate, and as a result, I suffered from a headache for 3 days. Upon hearing this, Ananda was deeply shaken in his heart. The Blessed One, originally, karma is so profound and heavy that even you cannot alter it. The Buddha gently said, Ananda, karma is created by sentient beings themselves. Buddhas and Bodhisattvas can only guide sentient beings on how to avoid unwholesome causes and accumulate wholesome causes. They cannot bear the karmic consequences on behalf of others. This is the principle that all dharmas are empty, yet cause and effect are not empty. Ananda pondered for a moment and then asked, Shakyamuni, how should we act to avoid negative karmic consequences and attain good retributions? The Buddha smiled and said, Ananda, to change your destiny, you must strive from the causes. Observing precepts and cultivating goodness, broadly forming wholesome connections, and diligently practicing cultivation are all methods of sowing wholesome causes. Only in this way can one gradually eradicate negative karma, accumulate merit and virtue, and ultimately transcend suffering to attain happiness. Venerable Ananda respectfully said, Blessed One, I understand. Cause and effect cannot be violated, but through practice, we can transform future karmic results. This is the true teaching imparted to us by the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. The Buddha smiled and nodded. Well said, Ananda. If you can comprehend this truth, it is true great wisdom. After hearing the Buddha's discourse on cause and effect, Ananda's understanding of the Dharma deepened, yet he still had some lingering questions. He respectfully asked again, Shakyamuni, since cause and effect cannot be reversed, and even Buddhas and Bodhisattvas cannot change the karma of sentient beings, what should we do to correspond with them and receive their salvation? The Buddha smiled gently and slowly replied, Ananda, your question is excellent. The salvation of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas is like sunlight illuminating the earth everywhere, and like clear spring water flowing silently, nourishing all things. However, if sentient beings truly wish to receive the blessings of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, they must actively resonate with them. This is the responsibility of sentient beings. Ananda nodded earnestly and asked, World-honored one, how can one truly resonate with the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas? Is it enough to simply recite the Buddha's name and chant sutras daily to receive salvation? The Buddha gently shook his head, his tone calm, yet profound. Indeed, reciting the Buddha's name and sutras is important, but these are merely external forms of practice. True resonance lies in the harmony between one's mind and the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Let me tell you a parable, and you will understand. Imagine a person accidentally falls into a deep pit. The bottom of the pit is dark and lightless, surrounded by steep and inaccessible walls. At this moment, someone outside the cave lowered a rope and shouted to the person at the bottom, Grab the rope, I will pull you up. However, the person at the bottom of the cave remained motionless, neither reaching out nor responding. Ananda, how do you say those outside the cave should be saved? The salvation by Buddhas and Bodhisattvas is like a rope, always hanging before sentient beings. However, if sentient beings are unwilling to reach out and grasp, how can the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas pull them out of the sea of suffering? Ananda suddenly realized that the salvation of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas requires the active participation of sentient beings. If in our hearts there is no faith, no vow, and no practice, even if the Buddha and Bodhisattvas appear before us, we cannot attain liberation. The Buddha smiled and said, Well said, indeed it is so. There is also such a story that can help you gain a deeper understanding of how to resonate with the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Once upon a time, there was a poor farmer who worked diligently every day, yet still lived in hardship. He heard that Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva compassionately relieves suffering, so he prayed devoutly every day, hoping that the Bodhisattva could help him escape poverty. However, many years passed, and his life showed no signs of improvement. One day, he could no longer hold back his complaint, saying, "I am so devout. Why does the Bodhisattva not help me?" One night, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva appeared in a dream to a farmer and said, "I have long prepared wealth for you, but you have yet to discover it." Upon waking, the farmer was puzzled and began searching everywhere. Ultimately, he discovered a fertile piece of land in his own backyard, which had been neglected for years and overgrown with weeds. He suddenly attained profound insight, and his mood became much more open and cheerful. Soon after, abundant fruits were reaped, and life gradually became prosperous. After listening, Ananda said thoughtfully, "O Buddha, it turns out that the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have long prepared methods to save sentient beings, but sentient beings often turn a blind eye and even miss the opportunity due to laziness or ignorance." The Buddha nodded and said, "Indeed, the salvation offered by the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas is not the direct bestowal of wealth or happiness upon sentient beings, but rather the guidance and opportunity they provide to point beings in the right direction. However, if sentient beings are unwilling to make efforts and seize opportunities, even the presence of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas cannot alter their fate. Venerable Teacher, how should we diligently practice in order to resonate with the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas?" Ananda respectfully asked again, "Ananda, to be in accord with the Buddha and Bodhisattvas, one must begin with the mind. First and foremost, one should harbor kind thoughts and cultivate widespread wholesome connections. Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are embodiments of compassion and wisdom. If sentient beings' hearts are filled with greed, anger, and ignorance, it is difficult for them to resonate with the Buddha and Bodhisattvas. Secondly, one must diligently practice cultivation and uphold moral precepts while performing virtuous deeds. Purify the mind and accumulate merit through practices such as chanting the Buddha's name, reciting sutras, and meditation. Finally, one must generate the bodhicitta, aspiring to diligently work for the liberation of all sentient beings from suffering and the attainment of happiness. Only in this way can one attune mind to mind with Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and receive their blessings." Ananda respectfully said, "World-honored one, I understand. To be in harmony with the Buddha and Bodhisattvas, it requires not only external practices but also a profound transformation of the mind. We must actively seize the salvific call of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, diligently cultivate our practice, and widely create wholesome connections in order to truly transcend suffering and attain bliss." The Buddha nodded in approval. "Ananda, you must remember, the salvation of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas is everywhere, but the responsibility of sentient beings is equally important. Only by actively resonating with the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas can one truly receive their blessings and progress toward the shore of enlightenment." At this moment, Ananda's heart was filled with gratitude. "The Blessed One, I am deeply grateful for your compassionate teachings. I shall diligently cultivate and practice, so as not to disappoint your guidance." The Buddha smiled silently, his gaze filled with loving kindness and expectation. "A gentle breeze brushes by as I sit alone in the solitary garden, immersed in a profound tranquility and harmony, as if even heaven and earth rejoice in Ananda's enlightenment.